Okay, the banjo's tuned in G. From the bottom up, first string, D. Second string, B. Third string, G. Fourth string, D. Fifth string, G. And the strings are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As far as the right-handed position is concerned, you have to have an anchor, either your pinky or ring, one or the other, or both. Some will say you have to have pinky and ring down. Others will tell you you can do whatever you want, but there's enough evidence to me that there's good banjo players everywhere who do any of these three things. But pinky, ring, or both. I started on my pinky, eventually the ring kind of went down, then I rolled up on the ring because I wanted a little bit more height from the head of the banjo. So do what you want, but generally speaking, an anchor is preferable. I usually get my anchor just ahead of the bridge. You can kind of see the marks across the head here. This is from playing in various places on the head, but usually the anchor follows these patterns. So that's why that wreckage is there. In any case, that's where the hands go. I don't recommend putting the fingers behind the bridge because that means the fingers picking the strings are going to be very close to the bridge. Going to get a pretty shrill tone there, unless that's what you want. For some, that's wonderful. Anyway, I like to have my hand about here. As I'm looking down at the bridge, I can always see the bridge. When my hand is over the banjo, you can see that there's a gap. I have a clear view of the bridge at all times. That means all my picks are the closest things to the strings at all times. So there's a gentle lift in the wrist. I'll roll the sleeve up here so you can see what I'm talking about. A gentle lift in the wrist. You don't want this, and you don't want this. You want sort of this, you know? And it doesn't have to be dramatically arched. Anytime I tell people to lift their wrist, they go crazy and they do this. It doesn't have to be that way. Just a gentle lift. You just don't want it. You don't want it straight, because if you have it straight, then your knuckles are lifting up like this to pick, and you're lifting your knuckles instead of just drawing them towards your palm when you're picking. I'll show more about that after. Now, if I turn, you can see the lift that I have. And it may look fairly dramatic on this angle, this close to the camera, but that's about where I'm at. Now the curvature of my picks agrees with that turn in my wrist as well, because now I'm getting to the tips of my picks on each of these strings. If I have my hand flat, I'm sort of going to be playing off the side of the pick a bit and not really making it to the tip of the pick for a while. So as I slide through the string, I've got a lot of mass on the pick before I actually hit the string. So lifting the wrist and having the picks curved to the tips of my fingers allows me to simply draw the fingers in toward the palms, and I don't have to lift my knuckles as much. If I have a flat wrist, I'll play a little bit in this position. You can see these two knuckles pumping furiously up and down. You don't really want that. If you do this, you'll notice that the tips of the fingers are simply drawing in toward the palm as they clear the string. I'll do that again. And it's just a matter of letting them drop to have them fall back to the firing position, as opposed to this, where you have to sort of lift your fingers up and down. A lot of folks who play banjo like this will end up with their fingers lifting up like that. Have the banjo upright and perpendicular to your body. Sit upright in your chair. Use your position markers along the neck. These guys here. Use those position markers. The inlays face the audience. You get to look at the inlays. And after all that, you spent all that money on your pretty banjo, and I'm telling you, you got to face the pretty stuff toward the audience. Well then. Continuing. So the wrist is up like so. Check the tuning anytime you move your banjo. Good enough for our purposes. Once again, the wrist is up so, and I've got my picks curved a little bit so that I can get to the tips of my picks, tips of the picks with the string. And you notice how that minimizes my movement, okay? So I'm not shaking around, and I'm kind of minimally moving, and that's how I can get a good tone that way as well. If the hand is flat, the thumb is kind of pushing the notes away from the banjo. As open the wrist up a little bit, it starts to smooth out a bit. So if you might want to consider these ideas, I've observed a lot of very good banjo players, and I've observed commonalities among them, and one of them is that the wrist is fairly open above the bridge. Like I said, if you can have a clear view of your bridge, if you're looking down and you can have a clear view of your bridge, you're not mashed down like so, then that way the picks are always the closest things to the strings at any given time. So that explains some of how I choose to place my hand on the head of my banjo, and this is often how I teach my students as well. I find it to be an ergonomic position in that you can get your picks very close to the strings and move very minimally and have your fingers proceed through the strings with a fair amount of accuracy. I'll leave it at that for now. You can think about those ideas, and if you have any feedback, drop me a line. And as always, best wishes.